Cool. Well, thank you all for being here. I know everyone's super busy and it's still kind of a chaotic time, but I appreciate your time and I appreciate you guys all being here. I wanted to start by talking about the idea of collaboration and community and how important that is to electronic literature. In a recent call for works from the Electronic Literature Organization, Maria Gorkosia and Mark Marino included a message, and I'd like to share that with you today and start our discussion with this. The making of electronic literature is an artisanal practice born of community practices of sharing. While some artists find their way into the rabbit holes of eLit, most follow a guide or a teacher, learning as a sorcerer's apprentice. Whether this happens in a formal setting, like a classroom, or in an informal context, like a rainy day pastime for a family. The time spent sharing the forms and tools of electronic literature, as well as techniques for making eLit, is crucial to bring new artists into the field and new works into being. In that way, the process is very much like teaching other forms of craft, like sewing or even cooking, which has in turn inspired eLit, such as the field of gastropoetics. Personally, I've been really fortunate to have Dr. Jessica Pressman as my mentor for eLit. Today, I hope that you all can find that I could become a guide for you as you enter this exciting and diverse field. I want to introduce my role here on campus. So I'm actually serving as the first ever Digital Humanities eLit Programs Assistant at SDSU. My role is to strengthen experimentation in electronic literature on campus and hopefully within the larger local community. I'll be hosting workshops like this one, connecting students for collaborations and working on curating an eLit exhibition at the end of the semester, which Harmeet has shared the flyers for the exhibition and for the contest already, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm also working with a literary journal to create an opportunity for publication of your works. So I hope you all stay in touch with me. I'd love to be able to showcase your work at the exhibition and then also potentially publish it in a journal. My goal today is not to show you the entire world of eLit, but rather just to give you a glimpse at what's possible with eLit and also to show you how I've personally approached the creative process. To start, Harmeet's going to share a link in the chat to a blog that I wrote. And that blog should provide a lot of resources for you as you begin your journey in eLit. So if you could take a look at the chat when she shares that link. And it's a pretty comprehensive blog post and introduction to a lot of resources that will help you, including the electronic literature organization. And now I'm going to jump into one of two presentations that I have for you today. These slides were shared to me from Dr. Jessica Pressman. She's also a great resource for you to contact regarding the contest, the showcase, or anything related to electronic literature. So thank you, Dr. Pressman, for sharing the slides with me. So to start, we're going to look at one of the basic forms of electronic literature called hypertext. Hypertext uses hyperlinks. This is an example from Michael Joyce called 12 Blue from 1997. This is one of the most simple ways that we can approach electronic literature. But one of the main functions of a hypertext eLit piece is that it disrupts the linearity that you would come to expect in traditional literature. Whereas you might open a book and go from start to finish, with a hypertext, you're able to kind of jump around through the links and experience the text in a non-linear fashion. This is another example, Disappearing Rain by Dina Larson, just to show you again what hypertext looks like, what it can do, and how the reader is invited to collaborate with the piece. Again, collaboration is a big part of electronic literature, which you consider that there's the collaboration of the reader who is now engaging with the text in this way. But there's also this unique element where the computer and the code and technology becomes creative collaborator in addition to both the content creator and the reader. So there's a big kind of harmony, I like to see it as, that involves collaboration. Flash poetry started with, of course, Adobe Flash, and it's often fast moving. This has less control from the reader, and you're meant to experience it as the creator kind of forces these images and text onto you. Now that Adobe Flash has been retired, this style of poetics has been either archived through video or now created in GIFs and video. This is one piece that that's kind of made some history in electronic literature. That it's a really moving piece that is kind of like a hypnosis almost. For the audio works on it, because it does have this kind of haunting noise in the back. But you can see it's almost like feels almost like a hypnosis or something. So it, again, a completely different effect from hypertext. So as you experience these different types of electronic literature, you might start thinking about how the form of a particular piece complements the content, and how you might be able to create a piece that that has a particular computer algorithm or response based on the content you want. This is a piece of interactive fiction by Andrew Plotkin. In interactive fiction, again, we're asking the readers to be engaged with content. So in this example, the reader is actually able to type in actions or responses to the text, and then that shapes what happens within. Kind of like a very simple video game. You might see like you're choosing where to go, what to do, but all through text and through narrative. This is an example of generative poetry. Generative poetry, again, requires some action from the reader, and typically has a different response. So you get different little micro poems with each action that you take as a reader. This is an example of generative fiction by Eric Boyer. Same sort of concept, but you're going to have more of a narrative thread that's connecting. There's a lot of ways that we can look at technology. I wonder if even some of the ideas that have already been done, if there's new ways that we can look at this. Technology is constantly changing, and I'm always seeing different ways that we might be able to use new apps and new technology to challenge the boundaries of literature. You can see in some of these images, like an image on the right, that's an older iPhone. So you can see that some of this is all been evolving with technology. So I'm going to jump in here. This is a cool example that used Google Maps by Mark Marino. So it's a fictional narrative where LA floods, and utilizing Google Maps as part of that experience to kind of unpack the narrative.
Hey, Brent, can I jump in for just 1 second?
Please.
You'll need to share your sound for us to hear the audio of these works.
Oh, am I not sharing my sound?
No, you'll just need to, you can do that mid-sharing if you click
Okay.
on the 3 dots. I actually don't know how to describe it. There's like a 3 dots or more function.
It does say share sound. Maybe I just didn't have sound on those other ones.
Oh, okay.
Keep our fingers crossed that some sound comes through eventually. Here's another example of utilizing like geotechnology. So this is a map-based piece of literature. Twitter has a lot of opportunity also. There's Twitter fiction, Twitter bots, Twitter poetry bots, different ways that you can utilize Twitter. I think Twitter is a great place for writers in general, but there's also this ability to create additional Twitter accounts and to create narratives or to create poetry through this constrained form. So that's kind of a cool thing you can do. And I'll share some links later that give you some information on how to make Twitter bots. There's app-based literature. This is an incredible one. If you have the ability to download this, I would recommend it. I'm going to show you an example on here, but you really, when you experience it, it's a completely different thing. This is called Pry by Samantha Gorman and Danny Canizaro.
Five-minute warning. 5-minute warning.
After this, his brother came out, grasping Esau's heel with his hand.
So with Pry, you engage in a lot of different ways. As you saw in that last video, run your finger across the braille and then it reads it out loud for you. There's a pinching motion, a lot of interactivity that can adjust the narrative based on how you interact with the text.
Oh, that's really cool.
Augmented reality, another way to approach electronic literature. So
The thump. My grandmother was raised by a flamenco dancer. My mother had a that summer I fall off my bicycle and need stitches. My grandmother grabs my bracelet with the hidden heartbeat. You can still hear it beating. The thump. The thump. Harriet wants to make words. My friend supposed to be me. Words.
So very cool ways that there's a wonderful book called Beyond Page and Screen that does this, where it's just codes and you have to hold the pages up to a webcam and then the text kind of, comes off of the page. There's kind of an augmented reality effect too. So a lot of, technology is constantly changing. So there's always going to be new ways to approach this. Of course, we have virtual reality. So this is called text rain. The text actually would come down and the viewer would stand there and it would land and place, as you can see, around however you place yourself. And then you can kind of rearrange the words, interact with it. This one's called Screen, which is a quite incredible installation. I'll just show it to you.
Hand
Smoothing.
reaches under, back, of deep napping, paper, pastries, thanks,
on his fingers.
Find her. Must. But
So that you can see the interactivity. It's a very immersive experience where they get to rearrange the text and engage with the text in just a completely immersive experience, which would be wonderful to be able to do that. I think that'd be cool. This is another example. This is a kind of a interactive fiction piece where the characters would walk toward you and be able to respond to them and then kind of go through it, kind of like a game. Again, there in electronic literature, there's a lot of play, and that play can sometimes straddle that line of video game. Sometimes it's exciting, like a GIF and like Flash, and this quick acting thing. So, but there's a lot of movement and a lot of play involved with it. So for immersive spaces, this is actually going to show a kind of, again, very interactive, where the reader is engaging with the text. If you read the text here on the bottom, you can see that this was it's kind of a mashup text, is the way they describe it, which has historical references, folk patterns, and story fragments fished from project's Twitter feed. So multiple ways that the audience could interact and participate. As if you're noticing a trend, reader interaction and reader collaboration with the text is a big part of electronic literature. NetProv, if you're familiar with improv, this is basically the eLit version of improv. So show you an example here. It's like the electronic literature theater. So there are these groups that are put together, and then they're building the narrative through this kind of improv electronic group, in this case on a Twitter account. And then there are some multiple examples of this going on in the past. And it could be something that you put together and bring people together to do. This is something that interests you. So a lot of different ways to enter eLit based on your personal interests and whatever's exciting to you. This is an example of a virtual reality experience that also involved that kind of user engagement. I'm going to move quickly through this. I mostly wanted to give you guys an idea of all the wide range of what's possible with eLit. And then I'm going to move into some discussion of the definitions of eLit and some of my creative approach. Go to the electronic literature archives here, and you'll be able to experience a lot. There's a ton of stuff out there. You can start with that blog post that was shared in the chat earlier, and there are a lot of links and resources there. So I encourage you to keep finding new electronic literature. It's a whole field of creativity and of study and of scholarly work. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. As a transition, I'm going to show you a couple pieces that I've worked on. That way, kind of get more of an idea of what's possible. This is my poetry bot. The first tweet at the top is an essay that I wrote. So you can actually click on that and read the essay, which has been broken up into tweets. But the bot posts every hour its own micro poem. And the language that I use to feed the bot, I tried a few different renditions. I started with William Carlos Williams. And now it's doing the text for the majority of the time has been going from text from Jenny Holzer's art. So basically it takes the language, kind of mixes it up, and then produces a new micropoem every hour. This is one example of something I created, and then I'm going to show you one more example before I get into the next presentation. This is a game that I made called Existential Bounce. Not a lot of technical work went into this. It might look like it, but I actually found basically like a game engine where they give you like the mechanics of the game already, and then you design it essentially. So most of what I did in here, I actually did in Microsoft Paint, believe it or not. So I just found some different things, drew some things, wrote some things, and just kind of threw it all together. And this is the end results. So you have this little skull, and then I'm just using the left and right arrows to control it. And as you go up, read the text and experience the different images. Try not to fall. So there's a couple pieces that I made. The music on there is a composition that my brother and I made. So I put that in there, put my design in there, put the text on there, and again, the actual technical backing of it, I didn't work on, but I think if we were to maybe partner with someone who likes to code or likes to work on that stuff, again, collaboration is key here, and I think that would be a great opportunity to create different types of works that we might, as writers, feel limited by our technology skills. But I always think we find ways to do what we want to do. So that's my approach anyway. So I'm going to show you this, start off on this next presentation for you. And was the audio working okay on these last couple rounds? Was that coming?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now that you've had a nice kind of range, a little taste of the different types of ELIT that's out there, I just want to kind of, as you've seen, like ELIT requires a bit of experimentation. It requires a bit of venturing off into uncharted waters, both as a creator and as a reader. So you do have to take some risks. You have to get out of your comfort zone. There's some vulnerability, I think, there, because if you're a writer coming into this, you know, we're comfortable with what we know on the blank page, and our job is to curate words on the blank page, and entering this kind of space can sometimes be intimidating. But to me, that's part of the fun. You go in with this knowing that you're going to be a little vulnerable and maybe make some mistakes, and then enjoy that process. But with that being said, experimentation and adapting to technology really is part of the history of literature. You know, literature went from an oral art form to a written art form, from scrolls to pages, from manually copied to mass produced. So now with computer technology, I think we owe it to the art form to continue this tradition of adapting literature and continue to innovate. And really, the main thing here is to see that ELIT is a continuation of tradition, not a breaking away from it. And so I want to dive into this presentation with that in mind, knowing that we're what feels maybe a little foreign. I hope you see that it's really just another extension of what we've always done with literature. So what is ELIT? Well, we saw some great examples of it, but I wanted to give you a couple definitions here. So really, ELIT is, you can see in the top definition, a construction whose literary aesthetics emerge from computation, meaning part of the design, part of the functionality of the text is dependent on the digital space. So again, it goes on there and says work that could only exist in the space for which it was developed within the digital space. And that's from an essay written by David Heckman and James Sullivan. Below, we have a quote from Dr. Leonardo Flores, which is on ilovepoetry.org. And I think this is a nice way to look at it, which is really simple in the first line. Digital poetry is a poetic practice made possible by digital media and technologies. So it goes on to describe that just by simply using a computer doesn't qualify something as ELIT. We use computers all the time. We use Microsoft Word. But the main difference is when we use programs like Word, we're making something that's intended for the page. Whereas ELIT is, and kind of looking at the bottom of that quote there, it's more than being marked by digitality. Electronic literature is actively formed by it. So it's taking it one step further and not just utilizing software, but actually making the computer part of that collaborative and creative process. That's not enough of an argument for why you should be doing some ELITs. Hopefully you can see this, but this is a meme from ilovepoetry.com. I'll let you guys just read that on your own. So again, this is kind of using humor and rhetoric to make the case that you know, there's this room for innovation with technology, and that rather than using technology to just do the same thing that the page does, we should use technology to kind of explore this whole other arena and potential, and to me, exciting stuff. So now I'd like to show you what I mean by experimentation. I want to break down my creative process for you on my most recent ELIT piece, which is titled Luck. Luck is a digital poem in the form of a GIF that explores the issues and challenges related to the pandemic and order. I'm not going to show you Luck today because I want you to go to the Digital Humanities Center on the lower level of the Love Library, and I want you to see it in person. Luck right now is the first ever permanent ELIT installation in the Digital Humanities Center. It's going to be up for the rest of the semester. And I want you to go down there and see it in person and experience it. But I want to talk to you today about my creative process and how I created that piece. I'll say the first thing overall is if you're jumping into ELIT and you're not sure where to begin, start with what you have and what you know, and then slowly grow from there. You're going to be challenged. Again, you're going to step outside your comfort zone. This goes to both readers and writers. Start with what seems within range of what you're comfortable with, then slowly introduce a little bit more. I used 8 different pieces of software to make this one piece of ELIT. 3 of the programs weren't used for the final composition, but they were used for brainstorming and experimentation. I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. All the programs I use are super basic, user-friendly. I didn't buy anything extra. Although I think there are a lot of programs that you can use that you may not be familiar with. But again, I would start with what you know and then slowly introduce one new idea at a time so that you don't feel like you have to digest this whole new world all at once. But mostly my creative process is one of experimentation and discovery. I don't go into it knowing what I'm going to do. I just kind of have maybe a little bit of an idea, and then I let the process kind of guide me as I play and tinker. So the first program that I use is Chrome. I was doing some reading and research, and I was finding a lot of different articles about the border and what's happening in Mexico with the pandemic. And so Google Chrome, and the reason why I'm pointing out even these like simple pieces of software, because I want you to see that even just using a web browser, you're using a piece of software. It's a resource to you. So I started here. Then I moved to another software you're probably familiar with, Microsoft Word. And I started to collect fragments from these articles, and then I would write my own things in there as well. So it started to become this kind of hybrid text of like a collage of things along with my own interjections. I started to highlight moments that I was like, I definitely want to include this, start to underline things. And this was my way of kind of collecting all the text that I wanted to use. The first rendition that I made of the piece was in Windows Video Editor. So I'm on PC. This was the free program that I had. And I was like, I think I have an idea of what I want to do. Let's just throw it in here and see what happens. So I put something together in here. I played it back and I was like, I think this is working. It seems to be doing what I want it to do. So I at least like use this to kind of feel confident that my idea was possible. I didn't want to use that because it didn't really turn out the way that I wanted it to. So then I tried Stepworks by Eric Lawyer. This is a web-based program, free to use. And then I rebuilt the entire piece in here. You can see on the side, each slide, I inserted a little bit of HTML to kind of allow the text to do things that I wanted it to do. And when I finished this, I realized I wasn't really utilizing Stepworks to its full potential. And so it didn't feel like the right home for what I was creating. And again, so now this was the second rendition of the same piece. And I thought, I'm going to just try one more thing here. Again, just keep tinkering, keep experimenting, and see what works. So I went into MS Paint, and I was like, maybe what it needs is some little images, something to make it a little more engaging. I used Paint in that game that I made, so I was like, maybe I could do something like that again. So I started taking images, I was playing with them. I was like, maybe I can drag it, do this. But then I also realized, with ELIT, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And so what I did in another piece of ELIT might not work for this one. And in my mind, it just wasn't connecting. I felt like I was trying to force something in there that didn't seem right for the tone of the piece. It wasn't like a cartoony, fun piece. It was a very serious, kind of somber political piece. And so I didn't want to include anything too, kitsch or fun. It wasn't feeling right for me. So again, those were several programs I used that I just was playing around with ideas to figure out what was going to work. Then I recreated the piece again in PowerPoint. And I put together the whole composition in PowerPoint. And I thought, this is making sense because it's really cut and dry. It's really just showing what I wanted to show. It's focusing on the text. And I'm going to create this digital flash poem that's going to move at the speed that that I'm going to kind of impose onto the reader. So my ultimate goal now, I had this vision, was to make a GIF out of it, which was going to loop continuously. Well, once I had the PowerPoint thing, and I was like, well, I don't know, what am I going to do? Just show a PowerPoint? That doesn't make sense. So I thought, I'm going to perform the PowerPoint and screen record it. And then that'll create this video composition, and then I can take that video and turn it into a GIF. Well, again, I'm just going to be vulnerable here. I don't really know how to do a lot of these things on the computer. So I just went back to Google Chrome and I said, how do I screen record? So I Googled it. And then I followed some instructions, and one of the instructions said, hey, you have this program built into Windows that allows you to screen record. It's called Xbox Game Bar. And so I was like, okay, I guess I have this already. So I opened that up, hit screen record, and apparently that's how I screen record on a PC. And so I performed the piece in PowerPoint. I used Xbox Game Bar to record it. I had a video of my piece. Then I took that video and I sent it to my brother who uses Adobe Premiere Pro. And I sent him the kind of like, hey, here's all you need to do. Just load it in and bounce it as a GIF. And so basically we dropped the video file into Adobe Premiere and then exported it as a GIF. And the piece was done. The final piece is about 35 seconds. And it just loops continuously because it's a GIF file. And that's how I created Luck, which you can see in the Digital Humanities Center, SDSU, on the bottom floor of the library. I want to close this presentation by showing you some of the opportunities that are available to you for the SDSU students in the audience. The electronic literature competition, which was shared in the chat earlier, this flyer. You can reach out to me or you can reach out to Dr. Jessica Pressman. And there is a cash prize of $250. Submit by April 15th. And of course, this is for the contest, but we also want to showcase your work in the Digital Humanities Showcase. And again, one more time, just to repeat, I am partnering with a literary journal to create an e-lit section of their journal. So stay in touch with me so that I can also consider your work for publication. And I think that's all I have for you right now. I'd love to open this up for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, the floor is yours. Please ask any questions or comments that you'd like to drop in.
Brent, thank you so much for your presentation, by the way. I loved it. This made me, at least the aspect of you talking about interactive literature, sort of reading and having some sort of input from the reader, made me think of a style of video game out there called visual novels, which do sort of take you through sort of a text and a story, but with a visual aspect, and sometimes ask different levels of interaction from the player. And I definitely think that that fits into what you've defined as e-lit and what, we as a growing definition could be considered electronic literature.
Yeah, 100%. I actually, when I first came across e-lit, I talked to a friend of mine who is a video game designer. And I was like, hey, there's this thing, e-lit and literature and video games. I was so excited. And he goes, yeah, that's what we do when we make video games. Like, we're basically like writing a book into the narrative of what's, especially this certain type of video game, right? Not all video games. But, there's a genre of video games that essentially already acknowledges electronic literature, but they may not even call it electronic literature. They just kind of already know that they're just fans of literature, fans of video games, and they've already kind of created their own little like genre. So yeah, I think the more that we kind of talk about this and share this and express this with people, we'll find that there's a lot of overlap in different fields that some people are already doing this. They might not even realize that it is e-lit. But yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. Jake, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so Brent, I wanted to share just the amazing enthusiasm that some of the content creators that I've been involved with in the Burning Man virtual reality coding are expressing in what's happening in e-lit with not only SDSU obviously, but other universities and community colleges getting into e-lit, because there's a really wonderful way that a confluence of the virtual reality platforms, being able to maybe host little worlds with the, maybe I can put my video on real quick. The VR, this is the Oculus 2 headset. And so Burning Man did a platform called brcvr.org, where they're hosting all kinds of different digital events where, you know, possibly we could showcase some of the artwork that and the ELIT that's coming through, and, you know, open it up to a lot of different people from around the world. And there's lots of really cool software elements as well that I thought might be really great to, you know, share at some point. I by no means have any expertise in the software myself, but I just thought it would be a really great way to maybe brainstorm and offer that opportunity. And I can drop a link if you want, or share it with you privately, whatever you want. But I'd love to see you do something too, or collaborate.
Yeah, I love that idea, Jake. I think if you're passionate about VR, then we should work on a project that focuses on that. And we have actually a headset in the Digital Humanities Center. And we've talked about that. We're trying to figure out how to make that reasonable with COVID and everything, you know, and people putting it on their faces and stuff like that. So let's keep this conversation going. I think part of this discussion right now also, we should be transitioning to not just Q&A, but brainstorming for your own projects. And so if anyone wants to chime in on your own ideas that maybe kind of overlap with other, you know, we can all collaborate in some way. But I like that idea. And what we should probably work on, Jake, is over the next 2 months or so, let's get a project done for the DH showcase that you can submit to the DH contest. And then that'll be kind of our trial. And we go like, here it is, we've done this thing, gives us a deadline, gives us something to work toward. And then once it's done, now we can continue to showcase it and, you know, take it on tour, so to speak, and go to that next this event that you're mentioning and continue to do that. I think definitely squeeze the life out of any projects that you have. You know, I have that piece that on display in the DH Center, but I'm also submitting it for publication in journals. So whatever you create, I think you want to kind of squeeze every last drop out of it so that you get it out in whatever way you can and get as many people involved and excited and engaged with your work. So yeah, thanks, Jake. It's awesome. Couple hands up. Feel free to just jump in on the conversation. You can unmute. Jump in. Is it Samya?
Yeah. Hi, folks. Hi, Brent. I just wanted to ask you that what do you think about creating electronic literature or narratives in the broader sense of the term, especially in low data conditions and places where people do not have a lot of digital literacy or infrastructural conditions where they can use, you know, VR, AR, and or can use Twine or something. Absolute minimal conditions. How do you see the possibility of creating something multimodal and something non-linear in the absolute minimal data-enabled areas?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. I think that the wonderful thing about ELIT is that it is a very inclusive field. It's not limited to, and I hope that my last presentation where I showed you my very, very humble creative process, I hope that kind of inspires you to see that there's really no level of technical requirement that's necessary. I don't have a super duper high-end gaming computer or anything like that. I have a pretty basic setup here. I'm using all, you know, pretty basic software. And I think you mentioned Twine, which is a great, I think that if you're doing fiction, that would be a great place to start. I've played with it a little bit and I created an interactive fiction piece on Twine that was really, really, really low tech. There was no extra images, or it was basically text with the links, and it similar to some of the early pieces that I showed you. And with Twine, it doesn't have to be really complicated. You can actually create very in-depth interactive fiction that become like a full-on game. But you could also just create something that's just text with the links, so a hypertext through Twine. So there are a lot of really accessible forms of eLit that I think anyone, even with the most basic computer, can get into. And as far as sharing it, and as long as you have some internet access and you can share it on social media or any other way. I think that those big installations and the VR and stuff like that, I think it's great. But I also, I don't think that looking at that as the goal should be the way to approach it. I think that that's great for the people who have accessibility to that and who have the resources for that. But that definitely requires a certain amount of technical knowledge, funding, just access to space. So I think if you focus on the areas and just start with what you know and what you have, you're able to, again, both as a reader and a writer, participate in eLit, really no matter what level of savvy or what level of technology you have or what resources you have available. So I think eLit is, it's a global platform, and I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in translation. Samia, thank you so much for calling in from, it's got to be late at night there for you, so I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for answering the question. It's always a pleasure to listen in. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Romain, you had your hand up?
Yes, hi, thanks for a great presentation. I think my question partly stems from a lack of familiarity with electronic literature, but as you were talking about generative poetry, generative fiction, Twitter bots, I couldn't help but think of Roland Barthes' notion of the death of the author marking the birth of the text. And it seems to me like eLit is a space where textual meanings arise a lot from collaboration, user interactivity, reader engagement with the piece. And because of that, I'm very curious about the language that you use to define your own praxis as a producer of eLit. For example, do you call yourself an author? Do you write? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this.
No, a great question. I appreciate that. I think that everyone approaches eLit based on what they are comfortable with. There are some people that when they create eLit, that's their whole universe. They are an eLit artist in some capacity, and where the line of like literature and digital design and these things, those lines start to blur, especially for those folks who are primarily eLit artists. I'm primarily a writer. I'm working on a book of poetry, but I also consider myself, I consider writing under the umbrella of art, right? And so I consider myself a writer, but also an artist. And by opening up that door and that definition, I guess, of identity, I allow myself to look at all the pathways that I can use art, whether it's in a physical installation, which I've done, where you literally are putting words on windows and walls and in a physical space, whether it's electronically or whether it's on the page. I just see those as different ways of expressing the same thing, just different forms of taking the writing and allowing it to come through the form. It's almost like in poetry, if I'm writing and I want to create, for example, Unrequited Love poem, and it's a compact 14 lines. Okay, I'm writing a sonnet, right? And so I can use that form based on what I'm trying to say. So the form complements the content, right? So similarly, if I have a piece that needs to be fast-paced, I can make this eLit piece very fast-paced and make it a GIF. If I have a piece that requires some interactivity and, you know, breaking of linearity, then I can, you know, create an interactive fiction piece that does that. So then looking at the different types of eLit as just like a different form of poems, I can just look at them and say, well, what does the piece need? And how can I find the form that's going to accommodate that? Thank you. That was a good question.
Yeah, thanks.
Harmeet, you have your hand up?
Hey, Brent. So glorious talk. I loved it. So I wanted to ask, because in my experience, a lot of electronic literature is published. But can you imagine a world where it goes into the workforce, where people start applying electronic literature to the workforce? Like corporations, can Amazon use this? Things like that, can it be applied at that level?
Well, I don't know that I'm the right person to ask about corporate relationships to literature. That's a tough one. But I will say that I think that whether you self-publish something, whether you publish it through a journal, whether you project it on the side of a wall, however you choose to share your composition, you're participating in a community, and you're practicing your literary citizenship. And so I think that however you choose to conduct yourself within the space of the community, you're contributing to a larger conversation. So I'm not sure how that answers the question as far as like corporate use. I'm sure someone in that field could find a way to do that, you know, and I think anything can be kind of commodified or, you know, I don't want to use the term manipulated, but used in some way to accommodate a particular need. So I could definitely see that. I don't know what that would look like, but I think in general, however one chooses to share their art, whether it's self-published, whether it's just an installation, whether it's published through a journal, I think that you're contributing to a conversation, you're involving yourselves in a community, and you're practicing your literary citizenship.
Thank you. I just come from speaking from like the past DH programs assistances, and like, you know, there's Tina Lumbis who now works in marketing, and she probably applies a lot of what she learned from DH to her position. And, you know, we've seen it in a couple electronic compositions, like Project for Tachistoscope, sorry. And how, you know, essentially there was marketing in that. So I do feel like electronic literacy or electronic literature has a lot of potential, like you said. And so I just wanted your take on that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. And I do think that even if it's not applied directly, I think what you gave is an example of someone who learned through the experience and through learning and growing with electronic literature, then applied those skills to a job or to a professional environment. I think that's great. I think that one thing about electronic literature, if you just boil it down to really fundamental elements, it's taking you out of your comfort zone, challenging you to try things that you might not have tried before. And then that vulnerable aspect, both as a creator and as a reader, to kind of not to disrupt linearity, to disrupt convention. So I think that those are all qualities that as you experience and force yourself into this potentially uncomfortable environment, you're going to grow and learn. And of course, that's going to be able to be applied in any way as you grow both creatively and professionally. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, you're welcome. Here. we have a couple minutes left. If anyone has a wild idea for their own eLit project that they want to throw out there, now's the time. All right, well, thank you all so much. Please be in touch and let me know how I can help you. And I'm gonna put together some more workshops in the future. So if you would reach out and let me know how often you'd like them, any feedback that you have, and I'd be happy to accommodate to make sure that these types of events serve you. So thank you all so much. It was such a pleasure to have you here, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you very much.
Yeah.